each of the functions keeps us safe in a different way.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen like a dad reflex compilation? Children are like inches and seconds from death. Somehow their dad just like nabs them out of the clutches of the Grim Reaper. The functions aren't just there to help serve us. They're actually there to help protect us.
Which ones are you focused on as you're listening along, and which ones you might just be like, yeah, I don't really pay attention to that? We're going to make a case today why you might want to put some attention to it because it's serving you whether you know it or not. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
I'm glad you're here with us this week. We're going to do a two-part series. I guess you could call it a series if it's only two parts, I suppose.
Can you?
Or a two-parter. Two-parter? Is
Yeah.
that a word? Is in the dictionary? Two-parter? I don't know. Two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about, well, we're going to take the 8 Jungian cognitive functions, and we're going to talk about 4 of them today and 4 of them on the next episode to give them their due, so it doesn't end up as like a 3-hour episode. And we'll try to keep this even tight and focused today.
I'm getting a little self-conscious about the length of our podcast.
We have drift happening. So we're going to try to contain this and bring it down to some structure.
That's right.
But we'll see what we can do today.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today, Antonia? Let's frame this out.
So we talk about cognitive functions endlessly all the time and have for 10 plus years, and have many, many, many episodes on functions. And some of my favorite episodes are the ones that go into basically the nucleus of a function, because it's easy to point out something and say, oh, that's assigned to that function, or that's assigned to that function. But really a lot of behaviors, a lot of ways that we show up can be sourced to multiple different functions.
Yeah.
Like we'll do the same behaviors for different reasons. And so depending upon our personality type, our preferred functions are the ones that are showing up in that moment with that behavior.
Yeah.
But I like I like it when we talk about functions on a nucleus level because that isn't shared from function to function. That's one of the best ways to understand the distinction between all of them. Now, of course, keeping in mind that that's entirely theoretical, because functions never behave in isolation, in nature, basically. Like we're always using our functions together. We're using them what's called dynamics, cognitive function dynamics, which are how each of our preferred functions are relating to each other and showing up in combination and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when we're just trying to get a handle on it, it's nice to be able to create a distinction from function to function.
Quickly, I just want to make sure somebody that's new listening right now, we're talking about the cognitive functions of your mind, how you learn information, make decisions. There's 4 ways of learning information, 4 ways of making decisions. It's more complex than that, but that's the math behind personality type. And if we know the primary way that your mind learns information, makes decisions, we know what your personality type is. And vice versa. If we know your personality type, we know the way your mind learns information and makes decisions. So it shows us the strengths you have, some of the challenges and maybe uncertainties you carry through the world, and then opportunities for you to have those parts talk and be balanced in your life and be able to move through life in a better way. So that's really what we're talking about here at Personality Hacker. It's a layer deep just from the 4-letter code in personality type, what most people are used to. ENFP, I have ENFP preferences as a personality type. So you might have heard those 4 letters. The cognitive functions live below that. They're the source code or the code base for the personality types that we often see everywhere.
Yeah. So as we were talking about the nucleus of each of the functions recently, and I don't think it was in a podcast, I think it was on a program that we were teaching, it struck me that the functions aren't just there to help serve us, they're actually there to help protect us. They keep us safe, really. And each of the functions keeps us safe in a different way. So they are there to help us, live a better life or focus on different elements of life, one could say, and then have mastery over some of these elements. I personally think that each of the 8 functions represent 8 different channels or sort of aspects of life. Some are relational, some are introspective, some are, about seeing the world in a different way. Others are about getting things done. And so each of the 8 functions taps into a different channel or a different aspect of life. And we can't be good at all of them because of cost of specialization. So I think what type is that we are pre-wired to be hyper-focused and fascinated by, a smaller subset of these channels of life.
Yeah.
One person might be really fascinated by resource management and less interested in getting along with everybody.
Yeah.
And so they're going to hyper focus on the resource management aspect and be naturally talented and pursue skills that help them develop that. And, and that's going to be now something that's an integral part of how they see themselves and their personality.
Yeah.
So we focus on these smaller subsets and we get good at them, and then we start to define ourselves by them.
Well, and we unconsciously edit out some of the things that maybe we're not paying attention to, or we're not good at, or we're very uncertain about. And so we could be very dismissive of a very important energy in the world, something that would serve us well to tune to. Like for my type, as an ENFP, it'd be very easy for me to dismiss legacy, things that have happened before, procedure, something that has historically been the case for a long time. I'm a pattern interrupter. I like to break the rules. I like to do something different and unique, and not just do what the template is that's been given to me. But there's some moments when that's needed. I need to be able to follow a little bit of a template or do something that has been done before and follow a routine or a standard operating procedure. It would be ridiculous for me to always reinvent the wheel, but I know a lot of ENFPs who kind of find themselves there. They don't have a lot of substrate to build from because they're ignoring this. They're not paying attention to it. They don't see the importance of it. So today, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through the 4 perceiving functions. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about the 4 judging functions. So perceiving is how we perceive our world, or take information, learn information. And which ones are you focused on as you're listening along? And which ones you might just be like, yeah, I don't really pay attention to that. I don't care about that. Well, we're going to make a case today how it keeps you safe to have this in your life, even if you're not normally paying attention to it, why you might want to put some attention to it, or at least know it's there, be aware of it, because it's serving you whether you know it or not.
Well, and honor it, even if it's not a preference for you.
There you go.
And I think that's a great segue into the conversation today, which is that, yeah, we're not going to be great at all of these functions. We're not going to, we're not even going to be paying attention to a lot of, to a certain group of them, or, the ones that are technically called, in particular, the ones that are ego dystonic. And all that means is we don't really identify with them, even though we have access to them within our psyche.
Yeah.
And so what can happen with these functions that we don't really identify with is we can get really sort of disrespectful about them. We can say that that's not important, or not really understand why other people would focus on those things.
Dismissive.
Very dismissive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But if we know that they are there to safeguard something, if we know that they're there not just to help facilitate us building skill or getting better at something or building a better life, but actually they're there to protect us, then we might, we might have a little bit more, give it a little bit more honor, a little bit more due. And even if we're not going to ourselves become highly adept or start diving into that function and getting really good at it, maybe we'll be more open to having people in our life that represents it for us, and maybe see how them being a representation of those functions and bringing that energy to our life is serving us, it's protecting us. And helping us, not fall into some pitfalls that we might have done otherwise, if those people weren't in our life, and then have some gratitude towards that.
So let's jump right in here. Let's pick extroverted intuition.
Oh, okay.
This is the one that you and I use as a preferred function just because of our personality types, Antonia. And it's one that I think is a little bit misunderstood maybe on what it does. And I think a lot of people might fear this kind of energy, this disruptive, what if we didn't have to do things the way we've always done them? Well, it's like, yeah, that's nice to ask in theory, guys, but that's going to disrupt a lot of things. So how the heck is that going to keep anybody safe? Or, how's that going to be helpful? It seems like it just creates chaos in any normal operating system, right?
Yes. Well, and I think that people who don't use the function, don't identify with it, and are around maybe less mature users of the function actually feel it's a very unsafe function. It feels like it's just designed to throw you off, like you said, disrupt your plans. It doesn't feel particularly safe at all.
So what's its purpose first? Let's start there with it, like away from any application. Why, like, what's extroverted intuition doing? Yeah.
So intuition is pattern. I like to think of it as advanced pattern recognition. Basically, it's quickly patterning, particularly in the extroverted version. And so it's pattern recognition pointed to the outside world. And I've said this before, and I'll probably say it a million times more. This is kind of reductionist, but the way that I see the functions is that the extroverted functions, all 4 of the extroverted versions, are meant to live life, and the introverted versions are meant to process what's been lived. And so if you're using extroverted intuition, well, what does it mean to live pattern recognition? And to me, it just seems like it's an obvious way of navigating through life using very quick reads on a situation, very quick patterns, and being able to idea generate at like a speed that allows you to call upon it in the moment. Like, as in, you don't have to have pre-thought about this. You don't have to have, like kind of future paced. You don't have to, you don't have to plan. You just have to let it happen. And when that happens, you end up with all sorts of ideas. Sometimes it's spotting opportunities, but most of the time it's coming up with a novel way of doing something. Or maybe sometimes it's not a novel way. Maybe it's a novel way for you because you've never done it this way.
Yeah.
But you're almost like sort of inventing things as you go.
Yeah. I think we call this exploration. We've given a nickname, exploration. It's about exploring the world in a intuitive or imaginative way. We can see an example of this in a verbal way through the comedian Robin Williams. If you ever watch a stand-up routine from the late Robin Williams, I would suspect he was using, whether he was a person that had this as a dominant function, which I suspect he did, clearly he's in this energy. He would open his mind, open up his mouth, and he would just start talking, almost like he was channeling a spirit entity or something. And that's not what was happening. What was happening is he was allowing his intuition to connect information that was surfacing his mind so quickly and then perform it outward. It was almost like this manic run. You would watch him just go through a performance. I don't think he even knew what he was going to say in the performance. It was just this random connective performance. Now, that's one way it's used. That's just a very basic verbal example. It's obviously very serious use as well.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't say, not to split hairs, but I wouldn't say that his was basic use. His was very advanced use, actually. But
it wasn't getting anything done. It wasn't like solving any problems.
Yes,
it wasn't like using it to to figure something out.
It was there for entertainment.
Performance.
Yeah, exactly. Performative. Exactly. If that's what you meant by basic. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the best ways to see extroverted intuition or exploration in action is brainstorming. It's like one of the best ways. And especially when you get a couple of people who are bouncing ideas off of each other. Yeah. And then we can do this. Oh, yeah. And then we could do this. Oh, what if we did this, right? And you can just kind of watch the volley happen back and forth where things are getting bigger and bigger and opening. And then taking those ideas and vetting them for the best ones. And if you're a user of extroverted intuition, this is something that you've had to learn how to do, which is not just grab all of the ideas, because you can, if you have NP preferences, you can have 1,000 ideas by breakfast. You've got to pare them down to the ones that are the best ones. And then now you have a plan of attack or an action plan, and that's if you have the benefit of that kind of conversation. If you're just living life, I know a lot of people who use this function to show up at a job that maybe, I know some NPs that have talked themselves into positions that they're not qualified for, and then just have to figure it out in the first week on the job. Like, they have to kind of fake it until they make it. But the function can sometimes help you legitimately figure things out at lightning speeds. Yeah. That it almost feels like you don't have a right to know that information yet, because you didn't get there through quote unquote honest means. You got there through very quick pattern recognition. Yes. Now, you might not be super high quality at doing it, but you can at least figure it out very quickly. Yes. So one of my favorite ways of thinking about it is it's basically living life like laying train tracks as the train is in motion. And trusting that your intuition will get you to the other side, like trusting, and I don't even want to say trust your gut. It's like, it's more just sort of trusting the sense of everything, and that you'll be able to put the pieces together fast enough to be able to, accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah. This is used as a strength for all ENFPs, ENTPs, INTPs, and INFPs. Thank you. And then it's a uncertain function for all SJs. So ESFJs, ESTJs, ISTJs, ISFJs, they have it in their cognition, but it's a lot less certain for them. And sometimes I think SJs can feel like it can be sabotaging energy. So like, yeah, how's this going to help keep me safe? It sounds like it's the opposite of that, Joel and Antonia. And then the other types, this is a shadow function. They're not even necessarily aware that this is running in the background often. Well, they're not making use of it very often. Yeah. And so, okay, so let's talk a little bit about that now. We know that the NPs are going to probably see the value in this just because we use it so much. We not have the definitions and the reasons behind it, but we have a felt sense of, yeah, this is an important part of who I am. I love this part of myself. So you're going to have buy-in from the NPs most likely. Yep. But let's talk about
let's go a little deeper. What you talked about this word safety, keeping us safe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty bold claim. How does the idea of disruption keep us safe? What in the world?
So the function saves us from over attaching to losing strategies, or particularly a single losing strategy. Now, that might not sound like that big of a deal until you are stuck in a losing strategy and you can't idea generate your way out of it. If you can't figure out, especially if it's coming at you quickly, if you've got all the time in the world to sit around and sort of figure things out, you might be able to come up with an alternative way of doing something. But extroverted intuition allows you to do it very quickly. So if you're stuck in a moment that you only have really one way of handling it, this is the function that gives you like 20 more ways to immediately consider to get yourself out of a a modality that might actually be sinking you.
I think of that quote where, what is it? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yes.
It's to protect us against that.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly. Yep. It's and even though one of the best words to describe this function is disruption, and a lot of people fear disruption. I think about things like disruptive technologies. Well, what is a disruptive technology? It's a technology that disrupts the usual way of doing things. And now we're just seeing things completely differently. And so when we think of disruption, or with this function's idea of disruption, it's like, I'm going to do things differently now. I'm going to stop doing the things the way that I always have. In fact, to a point that it's going to disrupt the trajectory of my life. That's different than just a moment of disruption. It gives you an opportunity to see a brand new way of doing something, a way that you might never have considered before. But it requires trust. And that's one of the reasons why not everybody benefits from the function. Is it requires a little bit of trust in your ability to read things quickly.
Yeah, I think this is true. So it's one of those things, I have a fragment of a memory. So if I'm completely wrong, take what I'm about to say for an illustration, because if I'm wrong factually, then sorry. But I believe I read or heard or watched something in the past. The people that do the in the Olympics with the big pole and they do the high jump where they stick the pole and they flip over the bar.
Yeah.
I believe I have read this, and I could be wrong, that they used to do that front ways. And someone realized that if they turn around backward and actually flip backward, they can lunge their body even higher over the bar. And so they actually changed the way that competition was held. I don't know that to be true, but if that's true, that's the example of finding a new way to do something that you've been doing a certain way all the time. And now, there's a new way to do this that I get better results. And without extrovert intuition or exploration, take the example if the facts aren't right. I'll look it up afterward. The point is, there's ways to go, we can maybe try something we've never tried before. And look, hey, it's getting us even better results than the way we had known to do it.
Yeah. Well, and people tried to fly for a super long time. And then they figured it out, right?
Jumping off buildings with wings on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There was no end to how often people tried to fly. And then eventually they figured out,
there you go.
Yeah, how to do it. And I'm sure there was a lot of other, other functions were represented in that for sure. But it requires a willingness to have faith in one's ability to come up with creative ideas and then not just think about them. That's one of the reasons why, even though I love the idea of a brainstorm to typify extroverted intuition, it's also an extroverted function, so it tends to get into action. And so it's not just sitting around theorizing, it's usually trying things out and test iterating and being very inventive. And so the function safeguards us from doing things the same way and then finding ourselves just sort of descending into a vortex of I think about sharks. If they're not swimming forward, they're sinking. Yeah. And we're kind of like that as humans. If we don't have something that we're moving towards, some sort of technology we're moving towards, or some bigger idea, or something that we're all carbonated around, some concept or idea that we have a carbonation or this sense that life is going to be okay and with hope, then as a species, we tend to start sinking, right? Yeah. Descending into a lack of hope or faith. And a lack of hope ends up creating a lot of not just dysthymia, but violence, actually. If we don't have something that we are connected together with hope, we become violent towards each other. And so extroverted intuition is part of what gives us a safeguard against, descending into violence. It helps us feel hope. It helps us feel like something cool is coming around the corner. And so let's focus on the creative energy of that. So it's a function that actually saves us in a lot of different ways. Now, one of the things that's difficult in these kinds of podcasts is a person that's listening is immediately going to track what we're talking about to the person that they know the best that uses this function.
Yeah.
And they might not feel that that person is doing what we're talking about. They might not feel like that person is using this function, extroverted intuition or exploration, to create hope or to only disrupt losing strategies. They may feel that person is like disrupting strategies that work or whatever.
Yes.
And that means that person is not tapping into the safeguarding aspect of the function, meaning that the function matures not just when it's used, but when it's used well, when it's used in a way that serves. And part of how it serves is through making sure that we're not disrupting the wrong things, but we're disrupting the things that need disruption. And when we're young and we have, we've got this fire hydrant of a function and it turns on and there's just like this endless stream of intuition, creativity, splashing out, then that's not a channeled version of the function. You need, you need to have it just like a broken fire hydrant is just like, it's a bunch of loss, right? It's a bunch of waste. You need to have it channeled in the right direction. You need to have it being used for a purpose.
Yeah.
And when the function, when extroverted intuition or exploration is channeled for a purpose, that's when you really see it showing up in this way. That's where you see it not only showing up beautifully, but also saving us, right? Keeping us safe in the ways that we talked about.
Yeah. So let's flip to the other side of this. We know that all functions aren't created in isolation. They have a polarity opposite. Let's talk about the polarity opposite of extroverted intuition. This is a function that's an introverted function, introverted sensing. We've nicknamed it memory, not because it means that people that have this as a cognitive function and how they perceive or learn the world have a good memory. It's that they go through their memories to know how they got where they are and what has changed in their life and what has changed in the world. Memories are important as a learning tool. Doesn't mean, now they could have a good memory as well, but they might need to use tools for memory aids like photos and mementos and other things to remember what happened. The point is that they're focused on their memories, right? That's the focus. That's where the focus is, to learn and understand the world. So you experience something, you take it in, and to your point, you process it later. You go through the memories of that experience and you say, what's the learning? What do I get from that? Who am I in this?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to understand from the situation based on what I've seen before and what this situation showed me and the differences between the two?
That's right.
That's really what that function does.
Yeah.
It uses a strength for all SJs. So ESFJs, ESTJs, ISTJs, and ISFJs will use this as a strength to perceive the world. And it's a little bit of an uncertainty for people like us, NPs, ENTPs, ENFPs, INTPs, and INFPs struggle with this. And again, the other types are like, it's hit or miss. It's in the shadow. Sometimes they're paying attention to it. Sometimes they're not. Often they're not because it's unconscious for them. So let's talk about introverted sensing. Any other qualities you'd like to add in about what this does for a human or what this does for us?
Yeah. Well, just to reiterate what you said, it's an introverted function, so it's meant for processing.
Yeah.
And sensing, we defined intuition as pattern recognition. Sensing is more about experiencing, right? And that's why it's called sensing, because we understand our experiences through our senses, and it's a direct experience. So if you have had direct experiences and then you process them, right? Well, what is processing a direct experience other than remembering it, right? And ruminating over the memory. And so it is past referencing. I think the reason why we're cautious now, because some SJs are like, I don't have a good memory. Now, I've never met an SJ that has a bad memory, honestly. They think they do, but I also had somebody say that they were really bad at keeping house, and I realized it's because they couldn't like vacuum their way out the door. I like looked into their house and it was pristine. So self-reporting is not always totally reliable, but most SJs do have a pretty good memory, but they aren't exclusively, like they don't exclusively have a good memory. Lots of other types can also have a good memory, but the function itself is designed to use memory in a specific way. It's used to review experiences in order to pull the meat out of them, in order to make meaning out of them. And so it's a very powerful function.
The review of the experience is more important often than the experience itself.
Exactly.
Like the experience is one thing we all have, but then the review, that's where the learning is, right? And looking back over it, even immediately, like right after it happened, just going, okay, what did I just experience, and reviewing it in that moment. So I think that this is a little bit more self-evident, at least for me, how this can keep us safe. If we're attuned to things that have happened in the past, I know that if I touch a hot stove and it hurt my hand and I have a very explicit memory of that, immediately after it happens, I'm going to review it and say, wow, I'm not going to ever do that again because that hurt really bad. I'm reviewing what that meant for me. And then the next time I have the opportunity to touch a hot stove, I'm going to say, wait a minute, I have a very, very sensory, painful memory of touching that hot stove before. Maybe I shouldn't do that. That's going to hurt me pretty bad. So it's almost self-evident how this can keep us safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what we remember from the past often serves us.
Yes. Yeah. It keeps us safe by making sure we extracted the right lessons, that we don't make the same mistakes, but it also makes sure that we stay connected to where we came from.
This is a bigger picture, like our culture, our society, our family lineage, things like this.
Right. Or just, I mean, it could be personal. It could be not forgetting where you came from in your own personal life. And I've noticed personally, I mean, I've started to create this algorithm for self-confidence. If you listen to the podcast regularly, you might have heard me say this many times. But at this point, I think introverted sensing or memory is a key component to self-confidence, because self-confidence requires us to have taken a lesson from the hard times or the difficult challenges that we went through. Like, we have to first, in order to build authentic self-confidence, we have to have like honestly lived through a challenging experience and survived it, right? Gotten to the other side, done well enough to feel like, okay, whew, I did that, right?
Not imagined it, but actually lived through it.
Right.
Have a real memory of this experience.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
an imagined theoretical experience.
Yeah, like not a, I could do that, right? No, it's like, I did that, right? And so once you yourself authentically go through an experience, a difficult experience, for a lot of people, they're just grateful they survived it and they move on. But there's all this self-confidence points that are just waiting for them to go back, review it, and then honor that was them, that they did that, right? Like, oh, I did that. I went through that. I was the person who, was able to deal, like get to the other side of that very challenging relationship, or I was able to get laid off from my job. And as hard as that was, I found another opportunity or situation. And man, I thought it was the end of the world, but here I am, and I'm actually in a better situation, right? Like it's like stories of survival, no matter what those are. We need to look back and go, that was me. I did that. I got to the other side, and then build the faith in oneself of having watched oneself overcome all these obstacles, and then go, yeah, okay, I now have a little bit more faith and trust in myself. I've seen myself go through hard times.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think of it as like fruit, like a fruit that's in your memory, ripe, just waiting to be picked, the self-confidence fruit that's just waiting for you to go back and harvest it. And so introverted sensing or memory keeps us safe because it teaches us how to connect to our past, and then also to trust ourselves, to have self-confidence.
Yes.
So that we can enter new situations with a little bit more boldness, more courage, more sense of self, and continue to watch ourselves get to the other side.
Two of our students, and then a bunch of other students joined in with them, but two INTPs a year ago, it was at our profiler training event in, I forget where it was, but we were a profiler training event, and they gifted us with a plaque for 10 years of podcasting at our 10-year mark. It's meant so much to me.
So much.
Because it was not just something that you and I recognized. Some other people, without us asking to prompt that, recognized that this is really hard to do for 10 years straight, every single Monday to release, every single week or Sunday or Monday to release a podcast all the time, continually, never taking a break. It's like almost impossible for people like wired like us and our personality types. It feels that way, at least.
Yeah.
So to recognize that and say, it was like, and we were having a really a tough time.
It was a tough year.
Man, when they gave this to us, we were in a really tough experience. And it was like a good remembrance of, look where we've come from. Look how much consistency and dedication we put into this. We can get past this tough time. We can go into the future. We've got this, because look at where we've came from. 10 years of consistency, Antonia. I remember like crying, trying to like hold it together because we had to do other stuff right afterward. But I was like very touched by this.
We had we always at the end of a profiler training event take a group photo.
Yes.
And so there's like 60, 70 students
trying to cram into space.
All trying to cram into this space, right, to take this big group photo.
Mass chaos.
Yeah, it's always a little chaos, right? And that's when they presented us with this plaque. Yeah. And I mean, you can see both of us are crying in the photo, but it's a beautiful, and then they gave us like balloons, right? We had like these balloons that said 10, happy 10th birthday or something. And so people were wearing birthday hats. And so it's this great, wonderful photo of what we've built, right? Like it's
with the students
all
there,
the students there,
all gathered together. It was really a fun experience.
It was actually gorgeous. It was beautiful. It was like, I mean, it was very restorative. It was very generative because like you said, it honored us. But we would have never thought about doing anything even close to that. You know, we were just like, okay, 10 years, got to keep going, because introverted sensing or memory is our 3-year-old or inferior function.
We did like a special episode, but we didn't even I still don't even have the plaque back here on the back wall.
Yeah, why isn't it right there?
It's downstairs in the living room
It's
area.
in a place of honor in the living room.
I guess it's because I want people to see it more than, but I should have, I don't know. We could probably bring it up here at time to time.
Yeah.
Or with our knickknacks behind us. Anyway, it's a wonderful moment to look at where we came from and to think, wow, we can do it into the future as well. So it kept me safe from not quitting. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that I was on the verge of quitting, but man, it's certainly tempting when time is tough.
I've been on the verge of quitting, like I don't even know how many times.
when things get really tough and you're like, you know, you put out an episode, maybe it doesn't have the numbers or people aren't giving you like, there's crickets on the feedback, maybe the timing's off or something. You're like, do people like what you say? Is it working?
Is this thing on? Right.
And so sometimes it can be, you just feel like you're putting a message in a bottle out to the world.
Yeah.
Other times there's a lot of feedback as you feel good, but you have to review all of it and say, look at over time, the consistency of the feedback, the consistency of what we've done, a body of work that we're leaving behind, and we keep going. And so it gets bigger and bigger, this body of work.
Well, an introverted sensing or memory helps you do that. Yeah. Right. It helps a person see their body of work. It helps them understand, like, oh, I mean, I guess I did kind of start out as an intern and here I am, you know, and
running things,
right? Exactly. Or I mean, I guess maybe I did. Man, I was terrified when I had my first kid. I was like, am I going to be a good parent? And now I've got, you know, like my kids are teenagers and they're doing okay. And maybe I didn't mess this all up. Right. And it's like, it gives you this opportunity to take like true stock of what your life experience has been and rest into yourself. Yeah. And so, it keeps us safe more than just physically. It keeps us safe emotionally and psychologically.
And you can see these two functions, extroverted intuition, exploration, and introverted sensing memory, they're polarity opposites, meaning they come as a pair for all personality types that carry these as strengths. One's going to be more of a challenge, uncertainty, maybe a weakness. The other one's going to be a strength, and vice versa, depending on your personality type. That's how type works. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is, you know, introverted sensing protects us so we don't jump ship too quick. We don't quit before we overcome something. We can stay consistent and we can look back and see what we've learned through the consistency. Mm-hmm. It helps keep us grounded and stable. But if we get too grounded and too stable, we get stuck in a rut. And that's what extrovert intuition or exploration helps with, is to loosen that up, break it apart, disrupt it. If it gets too stuck, too careful, we have hope and optimism. Mm-hmm. So one brings us rootedness, groundedness, self-confidence. The other one brings us hope, optimism, the ability to escape if we need to.
Pivot.
Yeah, possibility thinking. So these are beautifully complementary to each other, and they come inside of personality. Like they arrive in a personality type together, and part of the work that we do is helping people balance those energies, right? Balance them so one will be your strength, but it doesn't override the other value the other brings.
Yes, exactly. And so if this is one of your, what's called a preferred function, or another way of saying that is in your car model, then make sure that you are, well, first of all, like, go ahead and pat yourself on the back that you have this cool thing inside of your personality. Yeah. Like, first take stock and go, yeah, this is actually a cool thing. I'm glad that I have this. Make sure you're honoring the other side, like the less preferred side, and that you're doing what you can to integrate it, right? And to go, okay, well, maybe this is not the thing that I do. Like, this is not my favorite way of going about things, but I have it available, right? And it can give me great rewards and it can keep me safe. Yeah. If you have NP preferences, just remember that introverted sensing or memory is there to help you take stock of the past, remember where you came from, and learn the right lessons. And it provides, you probably are sitting on, there's like self-confidence points just sitting on the table. So go reap them. And if you have SJ preferences, remember that extroverted intuition or exploration might not be your favorite way. Disrupting things might not be your favorite thing to do. But remember, you've got it there to think outside the box. Like, if things aren't working out, if you kind of feel like things are starting to devolve, you have a very creative part of you that can start pivoting and thinking about alternatives. Now, you might not feel as certain about it, but sometimes you just have to pull the trigger on things. You know, if things aren't working out, like, don't stay in a terrible situation. There's a function there waiting for you to use it to pivot, to do something new, maybe totally disruptive, but still the right move, the right call. So make sure you're utilizing both sides of those if it's a preferred function or in your car model. And if you don't have it in your car model, if it says, Joel has mentioned, a shadow function for you, make sure you're honoring both of those things, right? And there is somebody in your life, I'm sure, that represents one side or the other or both. And make sure that, like you tap into all the good things that they might have available for you, their idea generation or their ability to provide some reminders of where you've come from or whatever. Like, make sure you're honoring both sides.
Yeah. Let's go over to the other two perceiving functions for this episode, and we'll pick up on the judging functions of the next one, the way we make decisions, but we're going to stick with how we learn information and perceive our world. Let's talk about the other two, extroverted sensing and introverted intuition. Let's start with extroverted sensing. We call this sensation. This is the preferred function for all SPs in the Myers-Briggs system. So ESFPs, ISFPs, ESTPs, and ISTPs. And it's an uncertain function in all the NJs. So ENTJ, INTJ, ENFJ, INFJ, they have this in their personality, but they're just not as certain about it. So extroverted sensing sensation, this is about the present moment. It's about the here and now. It's about tuning into a single perspective, first-person shooter view of the world right here, right now. I'm present. I'm watching my environment. I'm responding to my environment. I'm engaged fully in this experience. The eternal now, we could call it.
Yeah. Yep. And it's like you mentioned, it's extroverted, so it's about living, right? It's about experiencing, and sensing is about an experience. So it's about making sure that you're having an experience.
Immersive.
It's totally immersive.
Yeah,
that's right. So here's how this function keeps us safe, and this is another function that people don't always think of as being safe, right? Because it's looking for more experiences, more interesting experiences. It can be a little, it can feel a little bold to some.
Well, in our culture and even the type world, personality type world, sometimes talks about this tethered to athleticism and high octane amplitude of experience, like extreme sports or bungee jumping or skydiving. Often we limit it just to that, that conversation when it's got so much more to offer for us.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. The assumption is that if you have this function, you'll never be clumsy. And I think we talked about it in a recent podcast not that long ago. We're like, oh no, you can totally be clumsy. But it's usually that you're hurting yourself by having an experience. You're having fun. You're going and doing things. You're using your body, right? You're having you're in the moment. So the way that it keeps us safe is that it makes sure that we don't forget to live life fully. Right. It's really easy, especially in this highly, maybe you could even say overly technological world that pumps so many things to us. Like we were talking about how when we were kids, our parents kicked us out of the door in the morning and during summer and told us to go play. And we were fine with that. We did not at all, push back because we were looking for something to do. Right.
Yeah.
There was there was TV, but not that many channels, and who wants to watch TV all day, every day during the summer? That's like a boring summer. So we were always out trying to find something to do. And so we were living life. Now everything gets pumped to us, right? You don't really have to, it's unbelievably easy to be a shut-in this day and age.
Yeah.
You get your groceries delivered to you, get your food delivered to you, your prepared food delivered to you. You get every form of entertainment you could possibly want pumped into a billion different styles of devices. You can live a virtual reality inside of your home, right?
Yeah.
And can have quote unquote experiences in an alternate universe. But all of those things disconnect us from our direct experience of reality. And this is the function that tells us not to over-rely on that, not to over-rely on basically being fed the junk food of entertainment, but instead to go pursue life. People who have this as a preferred function almost always are like, yeah, I have to take a walk every day. I have to get out. I have to go do something. And that's because this is the function that tells them to go do stuff, right? Stop just being on the receiving end of, or be passively entertained. Go experience something, go do something. And so this is a function that keeps us safe from the type of depression and dysthymia that we end up having when we don't leave our cave, when we just stay put and allow ourselves to be endlessly entertained.
There's also a disruptive quality here that helps us. It's not disruptive in the way extroverted intuition or exploration is disruptive in ideas. It's not like, well, what if we didn't have to do it this way? Or, what if that connected to this random thing? It's like, wow, something new. It's more disruptive in, it's basically disruptive in like what's the direct thing I can do? Mm-hmm. So it disrupts bureaucracy, I would say. I mean, in a general sense, like not like actual like government bureaucracy, but like bureaucracy writ large, like anything that's over complex, like a extroverted sensing. If it was a person and there was like this, well, I think about this, like if you're ever in a mountainside where there's switchbacks, right? And it's actually not that steep. And it's like, it'd be very easy just to take the direct path. You don't have to do the switchback. It's like for extra safety, the switchback, just to, or maybe somebody that needs a wheelchair or something, but there's a direct path too. The energy of extroverted sensing is like, why can't we just walk directly there? Why do we have to do the switchback? Mm-hmm. That's the instinct. Yeah. And now there's reasons for the switchback, obviously, and all of those, but I love the energy that extroverted sensing. It's almost a question like, why can't I just go directly there? Mm-hmm. Why do I have to go the workaround? Why do I have to go the extra steps? There's a direct path right here. Why aren't we just taking the direct path? And I feel like that saves us for a lot of waste, a lot of hassle, a lot of delay. I mean, taking the direct path cuts through so much, right? Just take direct action. That creates energy. It creates enthusiasm. It creates movement. It generates its own possibilities in a lot of ways too. Yeah. So I think that's how it can serve us it actually keeps us safe in that way.
Well, and to add to that same analogy, there's also a version of extroverted sensing that doesn't mind the switchbacks, but because it's soaking it all in.
Yes.
Because it's drinking it in. Maybe the switchbacks give more opportunities for
presence.
For more beautiful, views, or like the ability to be more with the experience of walking up. Like it gives an ability to sort of soak it all in. And so
there you go.
Even if you're not doing, like saving time by doing the direct action, you're not letting any of it go to waste, because you're going to just drink the experience completely, and you're not wasting your time by doing it at all.
Yes. And I think that is very valid, that we need to drink more of our experiences in and spend time with that. But I think a lot of people would feel really good to have the permission to say, wait, I can just go and do that directly.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't have to wait for the paperwork to come back. I just can go and do it.
I can just go do that thing.
And it feels so refreshing. If you're ever in a culture like that or some environment like that, it's such a refreshing experience to just not have to like check in and get permission, get a hall pass for every little thing. You can just go do it directly.
Yeah.
It's really, it really feels good. It feels like it feels opening to the human experience. Yeah. And I think we need more of it, especially in the West. We're so overladen with paperwork and like permission slips.
Yeah.
In a metaphor, that this just helps cut through all that.
Yep.
It kind of the direct action carries its own authority in a way. It's just like, well, I did it directly, so I guess it was able to be done.
Yep. At any rate, this is the function that keeps us from thinking, planning, or reminiscing for eternity. Like it keeps us from just staying stuck in our heads, and it reminds us that that life it's not forever. Right? Like we only have so many summers that we get to live through.
Yeah.
We only have so many winters that we get to live through. We only have so many cycles we get to do. Our kids are little only once. Yeah. Like there's so many things that, like if you are hoping that all of these things will be put on pause long enough for you to figure out whatever you need to figure out in order to enjoy them, by the time you figure it out and lift your head, all those things are gone.
Helps with timing.
Absolutely.
Opportunity timing.
So that's right. So it's like, it's a function that keeps us safe from missing the important opportunities of life.
So this is a shadow function for me. And I think I was really made aware of how I was ignoring, like I imagine opportunities with my children, for example, as they grow up. I'm like, oh, I'll just do that next year. Like at a moment, this past year, I was like, wait a minute, next year they'll be a year older.
Yeah.
And one of my kids will be out of the house. I have to do that now if I want to do that. Like it reminded me, if I tune into this energy, like today is the day we live life. Now is all we really have. Everything else is an abstract. The sun came up this morning and I'm alive. Mm-hmm. And so, wow, what a beautiful moment, a present moment I have. And if I abstract this, I'm missing out on the wonderfulness of the eternal now, like we talked about. So I think that really helps us there. So it helps with the timing, protects us there. It also protects us. I think it also gives us actual protection. If I throw a volleyball towards your face, like,
Right.
or one is flying towards your face.
Yeah.
If you sit there and abstract, what is the meaning of this volleyball flying at my face? And you try to ruminate on it before you even get to the end of your thought, it's going to hit you in the face.
Right.
The ability to react and respond directly,
Yes.
to block it, to protect yourself in a very practical way, that's powerful. Like, we need that in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the function, I'm pretty sure, that's being used in dad reflexes. Have you ever seen like a dad reflex compilation?
Yes.
Where like half a dozen children are like inches and seconds from death and somehow their dad just like nabs them out of the clutches of like, the Grim Reaper. And it's kind of amazing. And so and this is the function that like literally keeps us safe from those kinds of moments. Yeah.
It's
exactly.
reactive and responsive.
Yeah,
very quickly.
But you have to be aware. Right? You have to be like aware of your surroundings. You have to be connected to your experience.
Very good. So let's flip over to the other side. Let's talk about perspectives. We call it perspectives. Its technical name is introverted intuition. Now, this is also an intuitive process. This is the opposite of extroverted sensing or sensation. And this is a strength for all NJs in the Myers-Briggs system. So ENTJs, INTJs, ENFJs, INFJs use this as a strength, preferred function to learn and perceive information. And all SPs have this too. So ESFPs, ISTPs,
TPs, and
ESTPs,
ISFPs.
All the SPs.
You did it in the way that's the hardest to track.
It's in my head. So this is they have this, but it's a little uncertain. Even if they have skill built here, it's a little uncertain in this intuitive process. Now, this intuition is not extroverted. It's not out there. It's internal introverted intuition. So let's talk about the qualities of this and how does this keep us safe?
Yeah. So intuition is advanced pattern recognition. It requires the imagination to be able to vision and see things that don't exist yet in reality. So that's what pattern recognition does, is it allows us to make connections around things that maybe, like we don't have the full picture, but we have enough of the picture to be able to make a pretty good speculation or a guess as to what's going on. But as opposed to the extroverted version, which is doing that rapidly in order to navigate through situations and experiences and see possibilities, this is the version that processes intuition. And so because it's internal, it's introverted, and it's processing these patterns, then it stretches the timeline much longer, and it allows for a much more thorough rumination of what those patterns can, like what exactly is going on here. So it's a function that taps into meaning and projections into the future, because it's like going like, okay, so I picked up these pieces of information and now I'm thinking about what they could be meaning. And if it means that, then how is that going to roll out, right? Like if I'm right about that, and then it starts to run a simulation, right? It uses the processing power to run simulations into the future and then go, I'm pretty sure this is what's going to happen. And then it removes the possibility thinking that extroverted intuition or exploration likes. This removes those possibilities and then focuses on probabilities.
Yeah, so we could say that extroverted intuition or exploration is more about opening up all the possibilities of connection. It's focused on the speed of connection and the fast-pacedness of, can I connect this and connect this? Here's all the possibilities on the table. Introverted intuition is kind of doing this pruning process. What are the probabilities that I can see?
Yep.
And I want to slow it down to create insight. The speed of connection isn't as important to introverted intuition as it is the depth of insight and meaning that can derive from running the simulation into the future.
Yeah. Yep.
So how in the world can that, I mean, I already think somebody following along, and I'm teeing you up to answer this, how can this protect us? How can this keep us safe? Why is that important?
Well, it helps ensure that we don't miss the meaning of things, like sort of the underlying meaning of something. And then it also ensures that we don't get caught off guard by unexpected shifts. Like there are shifts that happen that feel like they come out of nowhere until you talk to somebody who uses this function and applied it to a specific scenario. And oftentimes they'll tell you, oh yeah, I already knew that was going to happen like 10 years ago. I have a friend who has INTJ preferences. And I remember him talking about, he's like, this is way back when, I mean, we're talking like 15 years ago. He's like, if cannabis becomes legal, he's like, I'm pretty sure that what you're going to see like products being sold that are going to almost be packaged like iPhones are. Like they're going to create all these, products around cannabis. It'll become like almost like a boutique type of thing. And you'll have stores that will look like Apple stores, but it'll be for cannabis. And it's like, yep, that's pretty much what dispensaries are. And he saw this whole thing in his head, and he ended up being pretty much right. And so it was, and he predicted that, maybe probably 5 years before, or, in a lot of places, 5 years before it even happened. So it's not that...
At a time, most people couldn't even conceive it being legal.
Yeah, exactly.
He's seeing an industry.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
imagining an entire industry around something that people had to sneak around and buy from the street dealer type thing.
Yep, exactly. And so in a time period where people, when it became legal in many states in the United States, people were still trying to wrap their heads around it. Some people were still trying to wrap their heads around it, and he had already envisioned the industry. So this is a function that keeps us safe from shifts that might be very unsettling to us. Now, cannabis, it's like, well, I don't know what your opinion is on that, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, and I don't know how much that rocked your world or made you happy, but that can be applied to specific things in your life. That can be applied to what's going to happen in my future. And some things can be, as we've talked about with extroverted intuition, quite disruptive, right? Things that we never saw coming. But if a person is using this function and applies it to those subjects, oftentimes they can see it coming and can get to a place where they can prepare themselves for it.
Yes. I think it also helps create a through line for seemingly disparate events. If somebody's living their life and things are happening, it's like every single day is an isolated day in an isolated way. This person's been mean to me today. And then you go and tomorrow somebody's mean to you again tomorrow. And you're like, just in these isolated events, people are mean to me. You don't see maybe there's a connection or a through line. Maybe you're doing something that's causing this, or maybe there's an environment you're a part of that's creating a reality you experience over and over again. And this starts to look at the pattern of that, the meaning of it on a timeline. Over time, it started to understand, oh, this is probably what's going on. This is what the dynamic is at play.
Yes.
So it helps you get a broader view of all the moving parts, not just one experience in the moment.
Yes, it keeps you from being blindsided by underlying forces at play.
Yeah.
Right. So
I never saw that coming.
I never saw that coming. Or maybe I'm doing right. In a similar way that introverted sensing or memory makes sure that we take the right lesson. It's like, okay, I did that. I messed it up. So now I get to learn the right lesson, because it's like, how did I mess it up and how could I have done better? This is being able to sometimes take the right lesson without it having to be, a mistake, right? It can be, you can prepare yourself. You can see things coming down the road that you didn't have to live through it in order to take the right lesson. Like you were able to almost in a precog way get the right lesson. Now, not always, right? And there are disadvantages, by the way, that come with all of these as well. But we're just talking about how they keep us safe.
Yeah.
And introverted intuition or perspectives keeps us safe from catastrophes that if we just applied a little bit of simulation running, we can avoid.
Yeah. So this polarity of perspectives, introverted intuition, it's always going to be connected to extroverted sensing or sensation. They come as a pair in your personality type, no matter where it falls in your personality type. If you have one, you're going to have the other. One's going to be a strength and one's going to be more of a challenge, uncertainty. The idea is to balance them. And really this speaks to, I would say it's about the mind-body connection. You can see there's a lot of body or you could say it's the experience meaning connection, right? You're experiencing something maybe physically in the real moment, and then there's meaning derived from that. Or you start with some abstract meaning and then you go and see, does this actually bear out in real experience? It's about the experience and the meaning continuum, if you will.
Yes.
And based on your personality type, as you listen along, this is going to be in your shadow completely, like me and Antonia. It's fairly unconscious for me. I try to tune into it, but it's not as available to me as my other four functions. But if you're an NJ or an SP, this is going to be something you're going to be consciously aware of. And you're going to see the dynamic here and the balance or imbalance of these two forces at play, experience versus meaning of that experience.
Yeah. Well, and it's very important to have both sides of these functions operational inside of yourself, because one makes sure that you are living life to the fullest, that you don't get to the end of your life and you're filled with regrets because you didn't have courage, right? Like introverted intuition or perspectives, it keeps us safe by anticipating what's going to happen in the future. But if it's always trying to keep you safe by not having to ever experience anything bad, then you're not going to be living a very full life. Like experiences don't always go the way that we expect them to. And so if you only want to enter situations that you can predict the outcome, you're going to have a very boring life, and you're probably going to get to the end of it, and you're probably going to regret a bunch of stuff you didn't have the courage to step into, because you just wanted to make sure you were anticipating everything that could possibly go bad. On the other side, if you're always jumping in and you're only ever living life and having an experience, but you are not staying aligned to a bigger picture, you might have a lot of experiences, but they might lack meaning. They might not mean anything to you. And it might have been kind of like, well, why did I even do that? You might have done a bunch of stuff you shouldn't have done, just because you couldn't see the pattern of it. You couldn't see the implications, right? And go, well, if I keep doing this, I mean, it might be fun to the senses, but it might not have very good outcomes. And so both of these are really important to tap into if they're a preferred function or in your car model.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need equal parts of each. You just need enough of each to keep you safe.
Yeah. So remember, as we talk about these, we're talking about them in the purest way we can, right? These aren't necessarily tethered to a person. Right. And you mentioned this earlier, Antonia. As you're listening along and mapping it to yourself or somebody else, you might say, well, that's not how the person I know is using this. They're not fill in the blank. The maturity levels are different for everybody.
Yeah.
Some might be very young and have this energy, and they might bring it to the table, and it's not protecting them or keeping them safe. Maybe it's harmful to them, or, I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we use these things. Don't conflate a way a person is showing up with these functions with the functions themselves.
Yeah.
The operator is not the function.
You got it. And that's one of the hardest parts about recording any of these podcasts, is that you start talking about a function in isolation, and somebody will like, well, I know somebody who uses this function and they don't do that. And it's like, yes, because they are a unique human being that are using their functions as they wish, like in the way that they want to. But if you use the functions as we're talking about, and especially to protect yourself, then, and I was going to jump in as you were talking and say, extroverted sensing, sensation, and introverted intuition perspectives both are attempting to keep you from regret. They're trying to keep you safe from regret. One is the regret of an unlived life, and the other one is the regret of not
a meaningless life.
Yeah, a meaningless life that came with a bunch of really dumb actions, right? Like the regrets, I guess you could say sins of omission versus sins of commission. And they're trying to if you have both of them integrated, they'll keep you from that. But then I thought, that's the same thing that introverted sensing, memory, and extroverted intuition are doing too, right? Exploration. They're making sure that you're not living with the regret of never having disrupted your flow, always just taken whatever life gave you and just gone, okay, I guess this is my life. I guess this is what I'm doing, right? And never asserting a different strategy into your world. And it's also keeping you from just jumping around and hopping around everywhere, just taking every idea and opportunity and never really grounding yourself, never looking back and going, oh, okay, maybe I am on a trajectory here. Maybe I have come from someplace, and I can apply that, that same thing that I've been doing, I can apply it to the next thing as well, so that I have, a through line in my life. And so what they are all saving you from is regret. And if you use them well, if you integrate them. Now, again, if any of these functions are ones that are not native to you, find somebody in your life that it is native to them. And even if they're not the greatest representative of it, see if just being around them and being in their energy can help you develop a little bit more of it. You don't have to have the same flavor that they're using. You just need to have it in your life and see if you can't tap into, sort of that channel, that energy, to give it some honor, to understand how it can serve you, to understand how it can protect you from the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be great at it. You just have to give it a nod.
I think that's really powerful. And I think I would encourage people to look for the tension of opposites and see if you can spot them showing up. I remember working at the Baltimore Zoo in Maryland many years ago. I was in the marketing department. I didn't work with the animals. But I was tasked with creating this new tour of the old section of the zoo. The zoo's the third oldest zoo in the country, or second oldest zoo in the country. Like 1870s it was built. And there's this old section that was shut down. We're going to create a tour for it. Me being a little ENFP, I was like writing a little script, and I came to this part with this old stone fountain, and I was showing the ISTJ woman who was in charge of the education. I was kind of blocking through the script, and I said, at this point, I want the tour person to jump up on this wall here and, grab the people's attention by jumping up here on top of this and then, speaking about this part of the tour. And it was designed to kind of break the frame, break through a traditional flow of a tour.
Right.
So my extrovert intuition was showing up in a big way, exploration, trying to disrupt what a normal tour would look like. She pulled me aside afterward and said, listen, I love the energy. I love the way you're trying to create something new and trying something new. The problem is, if you do that, you're setting a precedent for the other guests that are watching the tour that they think they can jump up on top of these rock walls. And so you're going to create an unsafe environment for our guests by doing that, because you're setting the tone or the frame or the expectation that that's okay to do, even though you're the tour guide or the tour guide would do that. So I don't think we should do that, because I think it's going to cause the guest to have a precedent. And I think it's a beautiful example of two energies. And we got along and we kind of flexed it. We had a little bit of a different thing. I can't remember what I did different, but I did something different in that moment instead of jumping up on the thing. But to the point of this conversation, both of us were attempting to make it better. I was trying to create safety in that people aren't going to get bored by this. It's not as, it doesn't sound safe, but it's safe to the institution that doesn't get rote and boring and done the same way. And yeah, that's what I expected, because that's what every tour is like. I was trying to break the expectations to keep it fresh and new and keep the program safe from getting canceled.
Right.
And she's looking at keeping the actual people and guests safe and the actual physical environment safe. Both of us have a similar end, and we both want this to happen, but we're looking at it from two different places. And these energies are coming with it, inside of us as well. Like we bring these to the table. So we have kind of these polar opposites that have these considerations, and you're going to lean more toward the one or the other. But also, I think that's an external example of this playing out with real humans and what we're trying to represent to create a safe or functional experience for someone else. I don't have a good example for extroverted sensing or introverted intuition, but that was mine from my polarity.
Yeah.
And I think that was a beautiful moment when I realized what was happening there. I was like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. We're kind of in this tension of opposites.
Yeah.
And so don't forget, there's going to be a tension of opposites in these, right? And that's where you can easily dismiss the other side. I could have easily dismissed her. I'm like, I don't know what they're just bulldoze over it. But she had some valid points in setting the precedent for the guests. Now, I probably, if I was in charge, would have pushed the envelope.
Yeah.
But she was in charge of that part. So I was like, all right, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
I think also we've recorded some podcasts on these functions. We've gone a lot deeper into why the world needs each one, and we give it its full honor and due. Today, we're just talking quickly, just to give a snapshot of how it can keep you safe or what it can do for us to support us. We're going to talk about the judging functions in the next episode. But if you really want to deep dive, we've recorded 8 episodes. Just go type into the search bar on personalhacker.com, why the world needs. And each one of the functions has an entire, probably 45-minute to an hour episode dedicated just to talking about it. It's all of its qualities and characteristics and why it's so needed in the world, why it's so important. Anything else we need to land before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm glad that you mentioned the tension of opposites and how that's actually the way that we keep ourselves safe, is by making sure we don't ignore any of it.
Yes.
We can still specialize.
Yeah.
Right. And we should specialize, right? Like that's where we come in with our strengths. And so specializing in one or a handful of these functions is a good thing. It's just we need to make sure that we're remembering the other side. And that tension point gives us a way to make sure that we're not one-sided, that we're not overly pushing an agenda that isn't in our best interest. And so, yeah, that tension point is actually, that's the gold, right? Getting good at creating that tension is, in my opinion, a major part of what we talk about when we talk about personal development work using type.
Yeah. So if you're ready to go deeper into this, and we have our Personality Life Path mentorship open at any time for enrollment, at the time you're hearing this, you should really check it out, because we basically go through all 8 of the functions. We only talked about 4 today, the 4 perceiving, but we go through all 8, and we stress test each week. Stress test sounds severe. We just test each week your relationship with each of these functions. So in this program, you would have a touch point where we give you an exercise or a way to tune into that for the week while you live your real life. You come onto Zoom and we go through some of the process, and then we show you how you can go out and test it in the real world in your actual life, come back with the learning. And then we have a live event, 3-day live event, virtual and in person, where we talk through all the learning, all the audit we did in our lives and what our relationships are. And it's really interesting to see people, wow, I never knew this could support me so much, or I didn't even think about that function as an important part of my life, but no wonder I'm having trouble with my partnership or my boss or my career. I'm not even tuned to this aspect. So we all overvalue some and we devalue or ignore others. It's just how humans are wired. And a program like PLP, I think, can really help you understand and make you aware of the 8 areas of life and which ones you're pre-wired to pay attention to and which ones you're not going to do that much. Now, maybe that's a little more advanced for you to go down that road. I would recommend you could just start with an owner's manual. Over at personalityhacker.com, you get an owner's manual, one for all the 16 types. We talk about some of the aspects of what these functions do for us, how the functions show up. We show you your car model, how to get in flow, how to stop trauma grips, how to get out of looping, how to create an inner translator for some of the best parts of you to some of the most uncertain parts of you. It's all in those owner's manuals. We keep adding to them like as we go and keep beefing them up and create better and better experiences there. So while you're over at Personality Hacker, checking out some of those other episodes, get an owner's manual for your type. I'd love to see you get started on this journey.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and I think a bunch of different Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, well, like Joel mentioned and I mentioned earlier, every once in a while we're just like, why are we doing this? Well, every time somebody leaves a rating or review, I'm like, oh, that's why I'm doing this. So please do so, and I read every single one of them.
There's a lot on there. You just have a short memory.
There's like
a bazillion on there.
There's like over 1,000 actually, and
most of them are positive.
Like, yeah, I mean, maybe well over 1,000 actually. I think there might be something. I mean, there's a lot. We've been doing this for a while, so there's a lot of them. But I do have a short memory. I have an insatiable appetite for reviews. I need them all the time. I have a very short memory. Introverted sensing your memory is my inferior function.
Fair enough.
So anyway, it just means it means that it continues to have an effect. And so yeah, if you do that, it makes me happy.
That's right. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.